I want to see me get my joy back from playing basketball. And wherever that may be, we'll find out here pretty soon.
So that was Jimmy Butler talking about not having joy playing basketball anymore. I don't know about you, but if I made $48 million a year to play with any team in the National Basketball Association, I would probably be the happiest person on planet Earth. I am just saying, this Jimmy Butler saga has gone all General Hospital at this point, hasn't it? Jimmy Butler has officially requested a trade from the Miami Heat. We are going to talk today about potential landing spots for Jimmy Butler. Now, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 potential landing spots where Jimmy Butler could land. We're going to talk about all of that and a whole lot more on the NBA Rundown today. I have to say, this has just been absolutely hilarious to watch unfold. For those of you that remember what happened in Chicago, that remember what happened in Minnesota, that remember what happened in Philadelphia, it is not surprising at all that a Jimmy Butler exit would actually end up the way it is currently ending up. Now, we're going to talk about 8 potential places that Jimmy Butler potentially could land, to be totally frank, and we'll cover these in just a little bit. The top 3 places are the most likely places for Jimmy Butler to land. I did not include the Brooklyn Nets in this, or the Charlotte Hornets, or any of those teams that, quite frankly, have no shot at doing anything this year. I've pretty much just included some of the contenders in this list. To the list we go, and we begin with the Los Angeles Lakers, who unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for them, do not have D'Angelo Russell's contract anymore. And without D'Lo's contract, the very idea that the Los Angeles Lakers at this point could actually put together a package that would make sense from a salary cap perspective for the Lakers probably makes no sense. But you will absolutely hear a lot of people talk about the potential of Jimmy Butler playing with LeBron James and AD. But what the Lakers would actually have to give up would probably be too valuable for them to even consider a Jimmy Butler move to Los Angeles. Next up on my list is the Dallas Mavericks. The problem with the Dallas Mavericks deal is it would have to include P.J. Washington, and we know that P.J. Washington has not only become a fan favorite in Dallas, he's also a big favorite of all the other players on this Mavericks team. I'm hard-pressed to see that actually happen. You'd also have to include somebody else from the Dallas Mavericks roster, most likely Klay Thompson, who's almost at this point skied all the way down the backside of Career Mountain. Then there's the Phoenix Suns, and we've all heard all of this talk about the Phoenix Suns over the past couple months and how it is not working out with their big 3. We know that Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and a Devin Booker team appears to not be enough if you don't have enough other fringe players around. I mean, they're not even in the play-in at this point. They don't have any number 1 draft picks currently until 2031. So for them to unload most likely a Bradley Beal to Miami, they would have to, if you will, find a way to convince Bradley Beal that he was going to go to Miami. I do want to point out something as well, which is the Miami Heat organization. There was a comment that came out from the Heat organization earlier in the day, which basically said that they believe they can actually challenge the Boston Celtics at this point. Now, I don't think they're actually serious about that. Do you really believe a Miami Heat team with or without Jimmy Butler at this stage of the game, can challenge the 3-point happy Boston Celtics, who are averaging over 53 3-pointers a game? I think the answer to that is just absolutely delusional, if that's what they really think in Miami with the current roster that they have on hand. Now, we're going to get into the top three. Two more quickly I want to cover, which is the Memphis Grizzlies. They certainly would have to give up a lot. I don't personally like it from a team chemistry perspective. I like this Grizzly team sort of as is, with a couple other additions. The Grizzlies' biggest issue is injuries and a little bit of lack of depth, at least a down low in the paint. That being said, they certainly have enough assets to make a Jimmy Butler deal actually go down. Now, a lot of people have been talking about the Golden State Warriors as a potential place for Jimmy Butler to actually land. It didn't make it into my top three. It's my fourth team at this point. And I find it hard to believe, after the Dennis Schroeder trade actually went down, or Schroeder trade actually went down, that the Golden State Warriors would then find a way to also bring in Jimmy Butler. Remember, from a salary cap perspective, at this point, for the Golden State Warriors to actually make that happen, they would have to include several young assets that they don't want to include, including Andrew Wiggins, who is actually at this point having a pretty good season. All right, top three places for Jimmy Butler where he could potentially land. Number 3, the Houston Rockets. I love what the Houston Rockets are doing. I've talked about this before on other podcasts, how I'd hate to see the Houston Rockets actually upset the young nucleus with a veteran like a Jimmy Butler, though I think Jimmy Butler certainly would fit in with the head coach and his personality, as well as a lot of the other players. But the problem is they would actually have to give up most likely a Dylan Brooks and a Fred VanVleet. And there's no word out of Miami that indicates anything that they'd be interested in any of those players at this point. Clearly, there'd have to be one of their younger players included in a deal. They can't trade away Jalen Green at this point because he did sign a contract extension, so it would have to happen in the upcoming offseason. In at number 2 is the Denver Nuggets, and that is Michael Porter Jr. Everybody talks about Michael Porter Jr. actually being on the trading block. Denver could also include a first round, a couple other players in a package for Jimmy Butler. Now, I like what Michael Porter Jr. does. We all know that Jokic can play with anybody. The Joker has made Russell Westbrook look young again, at least at times, throughout this season to this point. So I think that certainly would be interesting, though I seem to think a Jimmy Butler and a Jamal Murray both play very similar games, and I'm not really sure it makes a ton of sense. But at least from a salary cap perspective, the Denver Nuggets, if they wanted to actually go ahead and make a deal, could do it without having to give up too much outside of Michael Porter Jr. And then in at number 1 is the train wreck that just seems to never go away. Now, we saw what happened with the Sacramento Kings 2 years ago when they finally hired a new head coach. They brought in Mike Brown, who led the Sacramento Kings to the playoffs for the first time in 16 years. And then what did they do during this past offseason? They signed Mike Brown to a contract extension, and really about a quarter of the way through the season, go ahead and can him, as only the Sacramento Kings can do. Look, there's a reason bad teams in the NBA are bad teams. There's a reason the Sacramento Kings actually missed the playoffs for 16 consecutive years. less to do with the players and the coaches, more to do with the front office. That being said, I think the Sacramento Kings are a perfect place for Jimmy Butler to actually end up. Now, it's a question of whether or not the Sacramento Kings organization is going to be able to re-sign De'Aaron Fox. And if they believe at this point that they are not going to be able to re-sign De'Aaron Fox, then certainly a Jimmy Butler deal, especially when you look at the contracts, could actually happen, and it would be one of the most likely landing spots for Jimmy Butler to actually end up. For the Miami Heat, on the other hand, actually getting De'Aaron Fox from the Sacramento Kings for a disgruntled player that doesn't want to be there anymore certainly makes a lot more sense than trading Jimmy Butler away for 3 or 4 mediocre players and a first-round draft pick down the road. All right, love to know what your thoughts and opinions are on this particular topic. I am telling you, this is an absolutely wonderful soap opera to watch. I have a hard time believing that the Miami Heat are not going to move Jimmy Butler before the trading deadline. I think at this point, if the Miami Heat actually truly believe what they said earlier in the day, which was, we believe we can actually take on the Boston Celtics, then they will find a way to move Jimmy Butler, because there's nothing worse than a bull in a china store. All right, that's it for today's NBA rundown. For the NBA rundown, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna